I'm Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, Facebook shares fall after announcing big changes to the social network. CEO Mark Zuckerberg says it could decrease user engagement. We will bring you all the details. Plus, tackling online extremism, Congress wants to hear just what Facebook, Google, and Twitter are doing to fight it. All three tech titans are set to testify on the Hill once again. And screen time. Is it a public health crisis when it comes to children? We look at why some Apple shareholders seem to think so. But first, to our lead. Shares of Facebook falling more than 4% in Friday's session, turning in its worst performance since September. In a post late Thursday, CEO Mark Zuckerberg said the company is redesigning its news feed to include more content from friends and family and less from businesses, brands, and media. Adding, by making these changes, I expect the time people spend on Facebook and some measures of engagement will go down. But I also expect the time you do spend on Facebook will be more valuable. The CEO made a nod to concerns over potential adverse health impacts of social media use, but didn't reference fake news. Here with me in San Francisco to discuss, our Bloomberg Tech reporter, Selena Wang. So walk us through what happened, what Mark Zuckerberg wrote, and what led us to this moment.
So this is all about Mark Zuckerberg bringing Facebook back to its roots as a social network. So that means reprioritizing posts from friends and family. He's trying to retweak the algorithm so that the stuff you see first is what's going to convince you to share and like and write comments back and forth. So maybe a friend asking for advice on a vacation, and that's going to be prioritized over articles that consist of this sort of passive reading. And Facebook's own internal researchers found that that sort of passive consumption is not good for people's health. It makes them feel bad. And he wants to make social media feel good again. This also follows some quarters where there's actually been declining consumption on Facebook amid this PR crisis of fake news, dissemination of propaganda. So Zuckerberg really wants to redirect that conversation around Facebook.
I also want to bring in Brian Weiser, Pivotal Research Analyst, joining us now from Portland. Brian, what do you make of this? How big of an impact will it have on the experience of Facebook and the business of Facebook?
Yeah, well, it all remains to be seen. It's pretty clear from my analysis of data that I have that usage per user was already falling based on some limited data, but high quality data we have from Nielsen for August and September. So in large part, this may be responding to trends that were already occurring. And to the extent that they're recognizing that there were real problems with the experience that consumers were having, and they're responding to it, that's positive. Now, from a perspective of the broader ecosystem that Facebook has made itself a critical part of, this is bad news for publishers in general, at least initially. To the extent that they have been relying on Facebook for distribution of their content through organic means, Facebook will just be a less important place to go. From an advertiser perspective, it's not clear, but if there is less consumption, one might reasonably assume there will be less ad inventory, and that would mean higher prices, possibly less revenue. But that's not entirely clear. There may be the same amount of inventory as before.
Selena, how much do you think this has to do with Facebook's concerns about, user engagement versus concerns about, meddling in the election and, Facebook putting us in our sort of respective ideological silos and creating more divisiveness rather than less?
I really think it's a combination of both, and they're both connected. As Brian mentioned, there's already been decreasing engagement, so Facebook is responding to that. They need to keep those numbers up in the long term. They want people to feel safe when they come to Facebook and feel like it's a place that they want to continually engage in. But as Brian said, that could mean that advertisers and brands and publishers will turn to other platforms like Twitter, like Snap, like LinkedIn. This could be very good for them. But at the same time, I did speak to some marketers who said that their clients plan on staying on Facebook. But now the key is to focus on influencers and actual individuals and people to spread the message versus these big public brand profile pages.
To that point, Brian, does it appear to you that this is more morally or business motivated?
I think it's both. I mean, I think that Zuckerberg genuinely is thinking about the long-term impact of every decision they make on the platform. And I think that when they're looking at the long-term health of the overall enterprise, whether you look at it through a commercial or a social lens, I think they're looking out for the long term here, not so worried about the short term.
So, Selena, what are we hearing from advertisers and people who work with Facebook? You know, how do they feel about this?
So in terms of the people that are going to be hurting the most from this change, it's going to be the smaller companies, newer upstart publishers like a BuzzFeed, like a Vox, that have really been relying on Facebook to spread their content and their growth in numbers and impressions. And I did speak with a startup founder who said that he grew most of his business through Facebook engagement and had been spending about 90% of his ad budget on Facebook. But as a result of this, he realizes that his content will no longer be prioritized to users, and he's now going to be looking towards other means. So he's already starting to switch his ad budget more towards YouTube and Twitter as a result of this. And a lot of these startups are also very frustrated because they felt like Facebook said one thing a while ago and they completely changed their strategy, and now they're sort of backtracking on that.
Brian, what does this mean for the advertisers, you know, small and large, that are at the whims of Facebook?
Yeah, you know, I think there's a couple ways to look at it. First is the actual spenders of advertising budgets may not change their budgets. It might just be that the inventory is more expensive, right? If there's less inventory, Facebook probably does have a fair amount of pricing power. So they might be less happy, but it is what it is. I think that on the margins, the only beneficiary might be Google, to the extent that nobody else has anything like the scale of Facebook. Twitter and Snapchat are just teeny tiny in comparison. And so I do think that if there is a shift of spend of paid media, it would be to Google properties, if not to premium publishers directly. But I think one of the things that's not fully appreciated here is that anyone who's been counting on Facebook for organic reach of consumers now realizes more than ever they need to own a direct relationship to the consumer. They need to not be disintermediated by Facebook, and that means owning as much data as they can about customers, investing in their own CRM systems, investing in their own web experiences on their own digital properties. And so that's actually good if you think about it for an Adobe, for a Salesforce, for anyone in that space.
All right, much to look forward to and watch for. Brian Wieser of Pivotal Research, thank you for joining us. Bloomberg's Selena Wang, thank you as well. We're also watching Twitter. Shares gained more than 4%, hitting its highest levels in more than 2 years after BTIG analyst Richard Greenfield raised his price target to $30 from $25 and said the company is, quote, in the early stages of a multi-year turnaround. He added the company may prove too valuable to remain independent. Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Television, produces TikTok, a global breaking news network for Twitter. And coming up, last time Google, Facebook, and Twitter were on Capitol Hill, it was all about Russia. Next week, they will be grilled on fighting online extremism. That is next. This is Bloomberg. Jeff Bezos is jumping into the dreamer fight with a huge scholarship gift. The Amazon CEO announced that he and his wife are donating $33 million to a college scholarship program geared towards young immigrants brought to the country illegally as children. Bezos was one of the signatories to a January 10th letter from more than 100 CEOs urging lawmakers to pass legislation by January 19th, the date the current government funding measure expires. Capitol Hill is far from done with Google, Facebook, and Twitter after grilling top lawyers from the three tech giants late last year over Russian interference in the U.S. presidential election. Lawmakers want to hear from them again, this time to examine just what the platforms are doing to fight the spread of online extremist propaganda. That will be on January 17th. To discuss further, we're joined now by someone intimately familiar with the relationship between the government, big tech, Representative Ro Khanna, a Democrat serving in the 7th Congressional District located in Silicon Valley. Congressman Khanna, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Emily, for having me back.
So what do you want to hear from these companies next week?
What have they done to address the concerns? Today we had Facebook announcing that they're changing their algorithm so that we don't have people being exposed to false brand advertising. What other steps have they taken? Have they done third-party verification? Are they increasing investments in machine learning to weed these things out? Are they hiring more reviewers? I just think they have to be transparent about what went wrong and what steps they're taking.
What has been unsatisfying about the answers you've heard from them so far?
I think they were very slow to acknowledge a mistake. What they should have said is when you have new technology, inevitably people are going to abuse that technology. The systems were exploited. We needed to do better. We did make mistakes, but these mistakes happen with new technology, and now we're going to take corrective action. I think it took too long to get there. There was a little bit of defensiveness when they were first confronted, but since then I think they have been more transparent. I think the tone has changed. I think they recognize there's a problem and they're being constructive.
Do you see a difference in the responses from Google versus Facebook versus Twitter? You know, who do you think has the most to answer for at this point?
Well, it's funny you say that, because anytime I talk to some of these companies, they'll say, well, we're doing well, but it's the other companies that are messing up. And I said, that's not how people around the country or on Capitol Hill look at it. They're not going to have the finer points of, is this Google or Facebook or Apple? They view this as a tech challenge, as a Silicon Valley challenge, and everyone is going to be painted with the brush. So I don't think it's worth getting into who's doing better. I think they all need to do better on machine learning and on having more human review.
Do you think there's regulation necessary here when it comes to monitoring online content or policing how these companies monitor online content?
I do think there is a room for regulation. The regulations, for example, about disclosure of political ads. Right now, there were a lot of ads. We didn't know who was paying for them. There may be some regulations needed about knowing your customers and making sure that they know who is actually advertising, and making sure that they aren't monetizing advertisements that may lead to inflammatory content. But a lot of it is also some role for Congress, some role for self-regulation and standards that these companies need to do in updating their terms of service and their own standards and guidelines.
We're coming into elections this year. What are your concerns, you know, with another election season upon us, and many of these changes, you know, if they're going to be made, not yet made?
Well, my hope is that we won't lose the positive of social media. There were so many candidates, Barack Obama, Bernie Sanders, dissident voices that were able to use social media as a platform to get their voice out. So there was a lot of good. Unfortunately, it was also abused by propaganda and false speech, on hate speech, on speech that was terrible towards minorities or women. How can we fix that without censoring the good parts of the social media? How can we have that balance? And I think the companies genuinely, the last few months I've been seeing, are working towards that. They don't want to censor the platform, but they do want to remove the offensive content. There's
been a lot of concern lately about the impact of some of these platforms on children, the idea of Facebook addiction, online addiction, and that these companies may in part perpetuate that. Do you think that criticism is fair?
Well, I think this is always the case with a new technology. As a father, I don't want my son watching television all the time. He's 6 months old, and I try to keep him away from the phone. So I think anytime you have television or new technologies, you have a concern. You want kids reading and playing and having human interactions. But I think what's important is that these companies have algorithms that encourage engagement, that doesn't just encourage passive learning. And that's really what Facebook has done in their recent step. They're actually saying their algorithm may have people spend less time online, but be more engaged. And their stock, I saw, took a drop because this may not be good for business, but it may be good for society. And I'm glad that they took those kind of steps.
How would you describe the relationship between Silicon Valley and Washington right now? Of course, in the last administration, there was a much cozier relationship. Some would say too cozy, and that there is a greater divide now, but there's also a risk to that.
I think it's complex. On the one hand, every person would love to have tech in their districts. And you saw this with every congressman and senator bidding for Amazon. They associate Silicon Valley with the future, with prosperity. They want those jobs. They want that technology. I went down to Paintsville, Kentucky, and Hal Rogers refers to his region as Silicon Holler. There's an aspirational quality to Silicon Valley. On the other hand, they have seen the abuse of these platforms. There's a concern that social media is perpetuating false propaganda. propaganda or inflaming the citizenry, and they want to make sure these platforms aren't abused. But overall, as I often point out, our approval rating in Congress is at 11%, and these companies are around 70 or 80%. So we're probably the last people to be lecturing Silicon Valley about their popularity.
All right, Representative Ro Khanna of California, thank you, as always, for joining us. Great to have you here.
Thank you,
on
Emily.
the show and in person. Good to see you. A reminder that Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Television, produces TikTok, a global breaking news network for Twitter. Coming up, the tech industry is still trying to assess the massive chip vulnerability last week. We will discuss how the flaw could weaken the close relationship between Intel and Microsoft next. This is Bloomberg. Infosys posted a 38% third quarter profit surge, this coming on a tax benefit and investments in digital technologies for the Indian software services company. But the new CEO maintained forecast for slowing sales. It's the first earnings announcement since Salil Parekh took over the job last week. He assumed the reins after a boardroom tussle that ushered out Vishal Sikka. Well, Intel and Microsoft worked hand in hand for much of the PC era, but news last week of Microsoft's vulnerabilities in Intel's processors has driven a wedge between the two, forcing Microsoft to do much of the work to patch security holes. Both companies are disagreeing over the extent of the possible disruptions to customer operations. For more reaction, let's bring in Alex Zukin, an analyst that covers Microsoft at Piper Jaffray. So, Alex, what does this mean for Microsoft?
Thanks, Emily. So I think what this means for Microsoft is that they have a chance to continue to show their customers that they are their partners, and particularly as they become a cloud company, helping transition customers to the cloud, I think is going to be very important. So you've seen, the compute fabric is inherently insecure, and the customers that learned about these vulnerabilities in January, I think companies like Microsoft that have had this information for quite some time, like Amazon and Google as well, they've done a great job, I think, patching. But overall, what we expect, this is actually going to drive more customers to go to the cloud, not less. So
how much does this hurt Microsoft versus Intel?
Sure. So I think it doesn't hurt Microsoft all that much. What our conversation suggests that the company's been really good about using software workarounds to address some of the potential performance issues on their cloud business. In the scenario where that's not enough and they actually have to buy more capacity, that could impact margins. But on the positive side, as these performance issues could be more pronounced in older systems, you could also see a PC refresh cycle, customers upgrading older computers and their operating system. That could actually be a good thing for Microsoft.
So what does this mean for the relationship between Microsoft and Intel?
I think Microsoft and Intel have had a strong relationship for a long time. I don't expect this to really meaningfully impact it one way or the other. I think that over time, as the hyperscale cloud vendors like Microsoft and Amazon have to differentiate more in the cloud and around AI and quantum computing, they may pursue more aggressive paths to design their own chips and own that part of the infrastructure stack. So I don't see this being a real issue to Microsoft outside of kind of what we talked about.
So how far, you cover a few other software firms, how far-reaching do you think this chip security flaw is? What actual impact do you think customers will see?
So we think it's very far-reaching. Our conversations with CIOs definitely point to this as being kind of an issue they're looking at. We're not seeing any overreaction on their front. We've talked to companies that we cover, like Salesforce and the Workday cloud companies. They seem to be doing fine from a performance standpoint. They've been able to write workarounds in software, and there's certain benefits around cloud architecture like multi-tenancy that allow them to mitigate some of these impacts. I personally, or we personally believe that this is going to drive more cloud adoption. So if you're a CIO and you're waking up to this January 3rd leak and you have to deal with your IT organization patching or making updates, are you in a better position than Microsoft or Amazon or Google that have had the opportunity to do this for 6 months? And I think as companies like Oracle and Microsoft continue to push customers to the cloud, this is going to be another reason why.
So what's your outlook for Microsoft for the rest of the year? I mean, big tech has been on a high. We've asked time and again, how long can this keep up? It still keeps going up with some volatility here and there. But what do you think the general trend will be?
So we actually made Microsoft the top pick for this year. We think that this, last year was a real catch-up in terms of the race in the cloud between Microsoft and Amazon. We think this year there's an inflection. There's a lot more advanced compute workloads are going to move to the cloud, and we think Microsoft's really well positioned both on the software side, in the enterprise, both on the infrastructure side, to really partner with their customers and drive much larger deals at much better margins, which will lead to much better cash flow. And so we think that's just getting started. It's really a generational shift in computing that Microsoft is really in the heart and soul of. So we really like it, I guess is the short answer.
All right, Alex Zukin, Piper Jaffray analyst, great to have you here.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you. Coming up, are you worried about your children's smartphone screen time? Well, some Apple shareholders are. We'll speak to a man trying to help bring some solutions to that parenting dilemma next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on Sirius XM. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Let's return to our top story. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg announcing major changes to the platform's newsfeed, putting more importance on friends and family over brands and marketers. This may cause a huge problem for publishers relying on Facebook for its large user base. Jachendra Walwal, Bloomberg Intelligence, joins us now with more. So how do you think this will actually change the Facebook experience?
So I think it's a good thing for Facebook because over the last couple of quarters and 2 years, actually, if you see the total time spent on the platform has been going down. And that's because, more people are relying on Instagram. And again, this issue of like marketeer content, it's not like a family content. So fixing this issue is great for long term. In the near term, it's going to be a slight impact on revenue, but we feel Instagram can more than enough handle the offset that they need to continue growth.
How do you think this will actually materially change how we experience Facebook? Is it going to feel a lot different?
It should feel back when Facebook was first out there, with respect to following your friends, following your family, and consuming content that way. And hopefully that sort of helps them fight the fake news issue a little bit. And from a publisher standpoint, what you might see is like because reduced content distribution on Facebook, they might have to rely more on alternatives. They might look at Twitter, they might look at Snap, LinkedIn. So publishers are the one where the risk is higher over here. But from a Facebook impact standpoint, I think Instagram could help them offset this.
And any number that you could give us from a monetary standpoint, how much do you think this will impact the bottom line?
So it's not the bottom line as much. So basically, if you look at Instagram, the revenue is supposed to be doubling this year. So basically, expectations are around $8 billion. And that should help them offset some of this. The other thing to keep in mind is pricing on Facebook has been increasing. And Zuckerberg has said it's more about quality of time and not quantity of time. So ad pricing increase is another lever that they can pull. And lastly, WhatsApp and Messenger. They have not yet figured out monetization, but that's something they can pull as well. So if you sort of sum up all these things and do the net effect, it should be a slight impact.
All right, Jachendra Walwal of Bloomberg Intelligence, thanks so much for your analysis. Sticking with social media and screen time, are such things actually fostering a public health crisis for kids? That's what two notable Apple shareholders seem to think. They've penned an open letter about iPhone addiction, saying, quote, there is a growing body of evidence that, for at least some of the most frequent young users, this may be having unintentional negative consequences. However, there is also a growing societal unease about whether at least some people are getting too much of a good thing when it comes to technology, which at some point is likely to impact even Apple. For more on this, I'd like to welcome Jim Steyer, the CEO and founder of Common Sense Media, a nonprofit that provides information and advocacy to families when it comes to media consumption and technology. So, Jim, what do you make of the claims that these shareholders are making?
They're correct. Plain and simple. They're absolutely correct. There's a huge issue today, and it's a public health issue, about the overuse and the addictive nature of cell phones and social media platforms like Facebook, the previous story you were just reporting on. So the issue is that families, parents, all of us know that too much cell phone use for our kids and for ourselves is a problem. And so Jana and CalSTRS are absolutely correct in calling this out.
So what is the problem? I mean, part of the problem is that we don't have, a long enough term where, we've been using smartphones so that we can see the effect on our kids. I know you guys do a ton of research on this. What have you seen about the actual effect on children?
Well, Emily, first of all, our research shows that over 50% of young people feel that they're addicted to their cell phones, and over 60% of parents think their kids are addicted. That's a very big issue because it has mental health and other kinds of issues that all of us as parents and citizens care about. I think the other thing is you can see that there's an arms race for attention. Your previous story was about how Facebook wants people to spend more time on the Facebook platform. Well, so does Netflix, so does Instagram or Snapchat. And so the issue is, how much time do you want your kid in front of a screen? And are technology companies intentionally building devices and software to make you addicted? And that's a very big issue. So I think it's very important when shareholders like Jana or CalSTRS call out large tech companies about their responsibility, because that is what this is ultimately about. It's about the tech industry, whatever the company, taking responsibility for the health and well-being of their consumers.
What should the tech industry do, though? They could say, look, we make these products, we can't change or impact how you use them.
Three things. One, they should change the design. You just were doing a story about how Facebook is redesigning its platform. So the tech company should be redesigning their platforms to make them less addictive and to urge you to take time off and not spend 24 hours constantly looking down at your phone or whatever. Number two,
what's the incentive for them to do that when they're running a business?
The quality of life in their society and you and my lives. The fact that you have a broader value than just shareholder value, although in this case, shareholders are actually calling out companies, asking them to do more. I think the second thing is, you mentioned that we need more research. We spend about $1.5 million a year at Common Sense alone on research, and that's a tiny fraction of what should be spent, but there's almost no other money spent on these issues. So we should be researching the impact on brain development, mental health, et cetera. The third thing is, and in Apple's case, there should be a public education campaign that's focused on, here's how you use the device wisely and in a balanced way. So I think this is a clarion call to the tech industry broadly, that your users do love your products. They provide a lot of benefits, but there are serious consequences here as well, and you need to be responsible and accountable for the downsides as well. And that is a positive message, particularly when you're talking about kids and families and common sense.
Statement from Sean Parker that he made a few months ago. God only knows what it's doing to our children's brains. This is talking about Facebook and social media, the thought process that went into building these applications, Facebook being the first of them. It was all about, how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. You wonder, if you are the person that's building this business, the people that are building this business, how they can make a compromise that could actually be worse for the business.
Well, but here's the thing. All good businesses balance public interest with their bottom line profits. Mark Zuckerberg just talked about his 2 young children and how important it was that he build a society that was good for them. Well, when you're talking about creating addictive platforms and software that can be bad for your children, that's a day of reckoning. And so whether it's Sean Parker or Chamath came out recently and talked about his role at Facebook in creating some of the more addictive software platforms, these are issues that the tech industry needs to face. And by the way, at Common Sense Media, the largest kids media advocacy organization in this country, we're happy to work with companies like Apple or Facebook or Google to change the way that they both design the products, but also urge their users to use them in moderation and with balance. I mean, at the end of the day, Emily, you're a mom too. We want our kids to grow up taking advantage of the technology, but also not being little automatons who are addicted to and are controlled by technology platforms. And there is a balance in the middle that is where we should be heading as a society, and where the tech industry has a responsibility to help us go.
Before you go, Jim, I also have a question for you about YouTube and YouTube Kids specifically. And there was a very well done Medium article a few months ago about some of these videos being suspect, some of them seeming to have no point, like videos that surprise children by opening eggs, or these incredibly long compilations of Peppa Pig. You know, what do you make of some of these videos on YouTube Kids, and what should YouTube be doing about them?
Okay, so, you know, Emily, that's a great question. And I actually, since that story came out, I've met with Susan Wojcicki, you know, who runs YouTube, and the other folks who actually run that platform. YouTube, in many cases for parents, is the biggest pain point they have because of the fact that kids run into many unexpected surprises on YouTube, including on the YouTube Kids platform. So what they're doing is devoting a lot more human resources, meaning hiring a lot of people to comb that platform and make sure that there aren't unexpected, unwanted, and inappropriate surprises. But here's the deal. In a world where algorithms rule the world as opposed to human beings and human values, you run into problems. And I think this is the beginning of a much larger societal discussion about whether it's Facebook or Google or any tech company. What is the balance between the best, coolest, fastest technology and profits with what's in the best interest of humanity? And that is a very important conversation for all of us to have. And we all need a little common sense when it comes to trying to find the right balance in that, Emily.
All right, Jim Steyer, Common Sense Media CEO and founder, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to see you, as always.
Coming up, one Boston-based company is trying to change the effects of agriculture and its impact on environmental and human health. How Indigo plans on doing this with its latest funding round, that is next. This is Bloomberg. The U.S. Trade Representative's office has put Alibaba on its notorious markets list for selling counterfeit products online. The agency says Alibaba's actions to clean up its Taobao marketplace are, quote, insufficient. The decision is considered a blow to Alibaba's global expansion strategy. In a blog post, Alibaba President Mike Evans says the move did not reflect its IP protection efforts and called the U.S. process deeply flawed, biased, and politicized. Boston-based agricultural tech firm Indigo is dedicated to harnessing nature to help farmers sustainably feed the planet. The company works alongside its growers to apply natural approaches, conserve resources, and grow healthy food. Just last month, Indigo raised $47 million in a Series D funding round. This after a $156 million round that pushed the company to a unicorn status in late September. So, how will the Indigo use these funds? Joining us now from Boston, Indigo CEO David Perry. So, David, thanks so much for joining us. How will you use these funds?
Well, across growing the business broadly, a lot of the focus will be increased R&D spending. I mean, the core of the company is really microbiology and applying that to agriculture, and a lot of our investment goes into R&D spending.
So talk to us exactly about how the technology works.
Sure. So microbes evolved with plants over hundreds of millions of years to help those plants fight off stress. And that could be help them deal better with lack of water, or it could be help them resist attacks from insects or disease. Modern agricultural practices have decimated a lot of those beneficial microbes by the application of pesticides and fungicides, et cetera. So what Indigo does is discovers in nature those microbes that were, originally evolved to help plants. We add them back to plants so that plants yield more and need fewer chemical fertilizers and agricultural chemicals to thrive.
So what's next? What is the hope here?
Well, the hope is that we are able to grow agricultural crops, improve yields in order to be able to feed a growing population, and do so in a way that's more environmentally sustainable. So we use less of our fresh water supply, we have less nitrogen runoff in that water supply, and we create fewer greenhouse gases through the manufacturing and application of chemicals.
And then explain how all of this factors into your business model.
So we use these microbes to coat seeds, and most modern agricultural crops the seeds get coated before they go in the ground. So we're basically just adding an ingredient to that. Those microbial seed coatings then get taken up by the plant. The microbes multiply inside of the plant and produce positive impacts on the plant. We both sell treated seeds, which improve the plant's performance, and we contract with farmers to grow more sustainable crops at a premium for the farmer. So the farmer makes more money, and then we're able to sell those crops to people who are interested in more sustainable sources of food and fiber.
And how many crops do you offer and plan to offer?
We're in 5 crops today. So the 5 largest crops in the world are corn, wheat, soy, cotton, and rice. And that's the 5 that we started on. We believe this technology will work on every major agricultural crop, and we expect to expand over time.
All right, Indigo CEO David Perry, thank you very much for joining us. Coming up, we wrap the biggest trends and players that attended the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, what you may have missed. Next, this is Bloomberg. Bono's Rise Fund is said to be investing in financial tech startups. The private investment firm is backing Acorn's Grow, the stock investing app, which allows clients who have less than $500 on average to invest in ETFs managed by companies like Vanguard and BlackRock. Ashton Kutcher's Sound Ventures and basketball star Kevin Durant are also Acorn backers. All week, Bloomberg has been live at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. The event celebrated the industry as a torchbearer for innovation, introducing new gadgets from VR headsets to AR glasses and autonomous vehicles. Joining us now, Bloomberg Tech's Mark Gurman, who attended the event. What stood out to you most, Mark?
The blackout, definitely. That was the talk of the town. But no, in all seriousness, it was basically really the reemergence of virtual reality. We wrote a really nice story, Mark Bergen and I, we were both at CES, about the ins and outs of VR and AR at CES. VR, we sort of looked at it as sort of a dying platform over the last year, but now it's sort of got a shot in the arm, a lifeline. Oculus has this $200 Go headset coming out within the next few months. All sorts of companies talking VR, but at the same time, in the backroom deals, we have Apple, Snapchat, Xiaomi, other Chinese makers, Lenovo, Samsung, LG, Google, any big company that you can name, your favorite Silicon Valley giant, Amazon. They're all working on AR headsets, but those are years away, and that was really the backdoor talking.
Of all the gadgets you saw, which trends or products do you think are the most promising?
Definitely augmented reality. Everyone that you talk to there that really understands technology, where the industry is going, recognizes that VR is going to be a niche player, a very successful niche player, I might add, until augmented reality comes down the road and becomes a successful technology on its own a few years from now. So we're really seeing the very early stuff, the underpinnings of what's to come down the road.
What is to come down the road? I mean, it's this big open question, you know, how much will AR really change our lives and how we experience the world?
Right, I think that the dream of these companies, Amazon, Apple, Google, is a pair of glasses that are as lightweight as glasses you might wear for reading or driving or walking around that can display information to your eye. So you can be walking around, and when you need it, the information is there. So it has cameras on the front. I look at you, I can get information about you, your Wikipedia page. I'm walking around, I get a text message or an email and a phone call. I see it in the corner of my eye. Very much Google Glass style, but cheaper, lighter, and more effective.
So what about when it comes to connected cars? I know that was a big theme. You know, what do you see on the horizon, let's say in 2018, for connected and self-driving cars?
So as it's been the last few years, this is not the Consumer Electronics Show. This was the Car Electronics Show. And there were a lot of booths related to cars. Toyota announced a big partnership with Amazon Alexa to sort of have a dashboard. very much populated by Alexa functionality. So I think what we're going to see is a lot more Google Assistant functionality, Amazon Alexa functionality, and perhaps Apple Car functionality in other car makers' vehicles. Apple has CarPlay, now we have Alexa, and Android Auto, a platform that you can connect an Android phone to hundreds of different cars and get an Android interface in your car. We're seeing a lot more of those technologies. So I think that, for maybe the third or fourth year in a row, is going to be the connected car strategy.
So what is to come in 2018? You know, what is Mark Gurman most looking forward to?
It's going to be interesting to see what Apple's going to do in the home space. They sort of were first. They pioneered the HomeKit platform, the idea of using your phone to control your appliances, believe it or not, all the way back in 2014. But I think they've sort of since blown that lead to both Amazon and Google. They have this HomePod delay. The things are adding up here. But when the HomePod comes out, we're going to wait to see if the conversation shifts to Apple being back on top of the smart home ecosystem. So I'm really excited to see, and we're going to try to find out, obviously, what they have up their sleeves, because they have to be doing something in this connected home market.
All right, Bloomberg Tech's Mark Gurman, thank you so much for that roundup and your great coverage this week and surviving the blackout. Thank you. I know it wasn't painless. That does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. A reminder, we are live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology. Weekdays, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Wonderful long weekend. That's all for now. This is Bloomberg.